just click the live streaming and it does it. It does.
Yeah,
it.
I think it's just using that cached key is the problem.
Hang on a second. I put the new key in.
Oh, you did?
I edited the original meeting setup.
Oh, now it says we're live. Hold on.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go.
Showing up now.
We're good.
Are we good?
Okay.
You can't watch the live end.
Right.
Okay.
Is it
So
still
that's being
streaming?
recorded.
Okay.
And I'll record a secondary copy also. So we should be all set.
And I am recording as well. So I think we're triply covered.
Okay. Then I'll call the meeting to order and remind everyone to tilt their screen in case you are party on the bottom, Zoom on the top, and I'll ask everyone to stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic which
which stands
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Nice to see faces we haven't seen in so long. Hi, Jean. Hi, Stephanie. How are you guys? I know you're muted, but I'm really happy to see you. I have nothing, so I'm going to pass it right over to you, Jamie.
Okay, just unmuting myself. Howdy, everybody. Long time no see. Just wanted to give a brief update on a couple things. One would be the COVID update, kind of where we are with a variety of things, and maybe answer any questions you might have at this time. And then I'll ask Matt Fitch to do kind of a budget update. There hasn't been a tremendous amount change since the last time because we met last week with the budget. Numbers are still the same, but we've been trying to do some trimming here. And so just kind of showing you what that might look like with some of the work we've been doing here. So first thing is, what a community we live in. This is just fantastic. We talk about the gift card donation, the $25 gift card for restaurants. We had, as of today, about 600 gift cards of the $25 value donated and redistributed. I just received another 250 to 300 cards today, just rolled in. Unbelievable. So we were out of cards. They're now sitting in the conference room over here, ready to be put together and for redistribution next week. Should cover another day sending those out. So people just so generous in giving. That's just fantastic. I also wanted to say that the feedback we're receiving regarding Brave Square, and so I don't want to underscore the lift that this took and the folks that made it happen. We literally trained our entire staff remotely and shifted all of our communication to a new platform at the worst possible time. But at the same time, it was at the best possible time because folks needed consistency and one place to go. Feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, that it's made a big difference. And remember, we're asking all staff to email the week's learning outline. So what's expected, where you can find it and engage in the learning, and then how do you demonstrate that you've done the learning every week by Monday morning at 9 a.m. And so as a parent of three, I get all these Brave Square messages coming in starting Friday through Monday morning, and we're able to kind of filter through it and make up a plan. It is a bit overwhelming, but it's far less overwhelming than what it was when I'm going to remind and then to email and then to Schoology Messenger and things like that. It's one place. So the feedback has been so positive regarding that. During our weekly forums, I had this, here's the burning questions. It's usually from parents and students. What's happening with commencement? What's happening with senior ball? You know, all these what's happening with our ceremonies, all these historic traditions. I will say that those that have not passed the closure status of May 15th, so they're beyond May 15th, we're moving forward planning as though that will happen. But behind the scenes, just to be transparent, of course, we're thinking about alternative approaches. How, if we can't hold these events in a traditional format, our first approach is postponement. We would postpone, try to select a later date. So for example, I've already reached out to the folks at CMAC and said, what dates do you have for us late July, early August, just in case, as a placeholder? And Vern and I, and Vern has also talked with his counselors, for example, and talked about what if we had to do a virtual graduation? We're taking things from all over the country that people are doing. We're stealing ideas, trying to personalize it to our district. What might it look like here in Canandaigua? We're putting these plans in place and these concepts in place as a backup, but we're still hoping, crossing our fingers, that we can do the traditional methods that we have in place in the traditional plans. I will admit, I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but hoping and then having plans in case. So that's something that keeps coming up. Athletics, I hear, and musical and concerts, I still hear about those. Some things are canceled, some things are delayed and postponed. We're hoping we can have any bit of a season, any bit of a production, any bit of a performance that we can salvage if we can be back together. So, we're looking at postponement, and I'm actually thankful that the governor is doing this in 2-week increments instead of just a broad stroke saying we're closed. I say that now, who knows, tomorrow maybe he comes on and says we're closed, broad stroke. But I'm glad, when Channel 13 asked me, I said, I'm glad they're doing it in 2 weeks. It makes it harder for us to plan, but I think it's the right thing to do because we don't know what a week, 2 weeks, a month out will look like. What will June 1st look like? And so, and also it keeps that level of hope, that there's hope that maybe something can be salvaged at the end. So just speaking to that. Also for the forum tomorrow, I just want to make mention that we have guest panelists. So if you're bored of watching just me, which I'm sure you were after the very first one, we have all 4 principals joining me for the panel, the forum. So it'll be fun. I'll go over the normal stuff that I normally go over. They each have a slide that's specific to their building, and then we're going to open it up for questions. I'm sure most of the questions will be for them, and which is great. What I heard people saying over and over again from these forums is it was nice to see a face from the district, right? And even though it's mine, it was nice to see a face from the district. So what's better? How about we bring in 4 other faces from the district? And I still go back to, I think at some point I'd like to see maybe a couple board members do one of these with me, maybe Stephanie, because they have a lot of questions about special education services and things like that. And so just kind of a variety of folks doing these forums with me if we continue to do them, which again, we're still having close to 300 people participating in these. So obviously people are finding value in them. And then the last thing I'll say is the governor was originally saying this has to be a coordinated effort by not only all of New York State businesses and schools, because although I don't like that he referred to schools many times as daycare centers, I know what he meant. It was that when businesses open back up and parents have to go back to work, what are they going to do with their children? I know what he meant. And then he also said a coordinated effort with border states. He's actually moved from that a bit. And now he's talking, even today, talked about regionalization of reopening. And so where cases are low, we look at different regions of the state. He talked about North Country, Central New York, Western, the Capital Region, Downstate, Long Island. He was talking about the different regions, how things may open differently. In our communication that went out today, I referenced that I believe when a reopen occurs, it's not going to be just like everybody's back to normal now. There will likely be a gradual release of restrictions, and there will likely be limit capacity again, social distancing pieces in place. So just having our minds wrapped around the fact that when we go back, in all likelihood, there will still be restrictions we're working within, and it's just not going to be everybody's back and everything's normal again. So there's those pieces. I'll also just want to thank our leadership team. I think but every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we do a Zoom session with the entire leadership team. Because CSE meetings have started again, we actually made an adjustment. And so we are up really early and meeting at 7 a.m. And we have the whole team there. A lot of them have hats on because they've yet to shower, me included. But it's just been really great for all of us to be able to come together. We share some laughs, and then we dig into the work that we need to work on for the day and for maybe the next day as well, because if it's a Wednesday, we also have Thursday to think about as well. And so just really, I think we've been fairly successful as we could be during this situation. because it's a unified team lift, and I couldn't be more proud to work with the team that we're working with. And it's not just the leadership team, it's our staff, it's our students. They've just been fantastic. Our parents and the community in general, really doing a great job. And then the last thing I just wanted to share before I open it up to questions about this, and then turn it over to Matt to talk a bit about budget is, I had an opportunity this afternoon. Many of you know I'm on a group of superintendents across the nation. And they asked me actually to come on and present on a topic. And the topic I presented on was creating a sense of clarity and community during a pandemic. Because I believe that's really been our focus all along, is how do we communicate, how do we make a very complex, confusing situation as clear as possible? And how can we make a community that's even stronger? Close-knit community. And so it was an honor to be able to talk to superintendents from all over, California, Texas, Missouri. I mean, they're all over, about some of the things we're doing here that, you know, we should be proud of, because I think we've thought about things other people haven't. And it's a testament to the strength of our team. So I'll stop talking now. Oh, I know I won't. One more comment. Going back to that regionalization of reopening in the regions, I hope you've heard, maybe you haven't, but I'll let it be known. Bob Duffy is actually in charge of the Finger Lakes region on the governor's task force to reopen this region. And that's interesting because many of you also know that he's very involved with the Chamber of Commerce. And we know the economic impact this is having on everybody. So it's something to keep a close eye on. I think Bob Duffy is really highly respected amongst many. And so he's going to have an eye on the economy, health, and the school systems as well. So I think he's a strong choice to be leading our task force in the Finger Lakes region. So I'm going to stop. Are there any questions about kind of what we're doing? I know you're getting the communications, you're getting Matt Schrage's communications as well. Any questions you have right now? And I'll just open it up to that, if you don't mind, Jeannie.
Not at all. Who's got a question or a comment for Jamie? I think it looks like we're good, Jamie. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Let's turn it over, if you don't mind, to Matt Fitch. Matt Fitch, do you want me to share your screen or do you want to share it?
Let me see if I can share it here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
All right. So as Jamie said, not a lot has changed over the last week. On the revenue side, expense side, we've gone in, we've looked at attrition pieces that we can take. We've discussed that with our department heads and principals over several meetings to really figure out what attrition can we take to help balance this budget. So I just wanted to go through what are the changes since last Monday when I presented the budget. What's our current status? A little bit changes in the reserves to balance the budget, and then the next steps. So what I did is I did this a little differently. I put where we were last Monday and our current budget status on the same slide, so you can compare them without having to go back and forth between the slides. So as you probably recall, last week we were estimating needing about $2.3 million in reserves and fund balance to balance the budget, which was a reduction of about $1,490,000 in our produced generated fund balance from the budget, reducing the amount of savings that we generate. And that does not include any future state aid reductions. As we've all heard this week, over the weekend, Governor Cuomo saying 50% state aid reductions, and then on Monday, revising that to 20% state aid reductions. We do know that if there's not additional stimulus that comes to the state, that there will be reductions. We really have no idea what that amount will be at this point. So we will find out. We're hoping by the first week of May. April 28th is the look back period I believe the state is going to be using. So we should know early May 3rd or hopefully what that first reduction would be. So what we've looked at over the last week and the changes in the budget is reduction of 7 full-time equivalents. We did have 1.5. We had the French position and the half-time art position in there. So it's an additional 5.5 full-time equivalents. What that did to the budget is it reduced it by about $300,000. So you can see that our gap at this time last week was about $2.3 million. Right now it's just under $2 million. And it reduces, that will produce a little bit more fund balance than we had originally thought. And this again does not include any future state aid reductions. So the 3-part budget, really the only change here is going to be in program. When we reduce staffing that affects students, so attrition to teaching positions, those types of positions, that all falls under program. So while program is still the largest part of the budget and still the largest increase, you'll notice that the percentage of budget, it's slightly lower than what I presented last. So another way to look at that current surplus deficit, on the left, the $77,815,668 is the current budget status. The majority of that is the tax levy, which is the 2.19% increase, which is at the tax levy limit. And then we need to use $1,995,000 appropriated fund balance and reserves to balance the budget. This still has in the budget the $100,000 project for the elementary school, which would be aided. That's for the window balances. That would be aided at our building aid ratio of 73.2% next year. And then the $700,000 project for the maintenance barn, that would be up at the operations center. So the appropriated reserves, there's been some minor changes here. Employees retirement system is bumped up slightly to $1 million. I've also been able to add the unemployment numbers. As you remember, at the last meeting, we had not adjusted any unemployment costs in the budget, and also we had not adjusted any of the unemployment reserve. Typically, we budget $20,000. I've adjusted that to $100,000. We still don't have a clear picture of what that will be, and it really depends on whether we're back in school and how much we're back in school. This really resolves around a lot of our substitutes that would typically be working but are now receiving unemployment, which we pay for. And then the fund balance is really the big change that you'll see here down the bottom. It's down to $402,000 in appropriated fund balance. So we really are looking at this as multi-year budgeting because while this year is difficult, even before any additional state aid reductions, we do know that it's going to most likely be difficult into next year as well. In order for state aid to stay flat next year, the state will have to increase their spending by $1.1 billion just to remain at our current flat levels before any reductions. We're assuming that the consumer price index will be extremely low, if not zero. And if, as you know, our tax cap calculation, one of the major parts of that is the CPI, up to 2% growth. So between 0 and 2% is that growth factor. So the lower that number, the lower the tax levy limit would be. ERS and TRS rates are based a lot on their investment returns on a 5-year average. If the stock market continues staying down throughout the year, their investment returns obviously will be lower than anticipated. And then obviously we always have to be concerned about health insurance increases in the future. So next steps, they're the same next steps we had last week. How do we handle potential mid-year aid reductions to prevent cuts to program and staff? It really depends on how large of a deduction we receive. If it's the 20% reduction that the governor had mentioned on Monday, that'll be catastrophic to schools statewide. That's not an amount of money that can really absorb. So we're waiting on that period, as I discussed earlier. looking at what's the best way to fund our reserves at year end to put us in the best financial position for future years. And we still don't have any clarity around the budget vote date and the timeline. We do know that it'll be after June 1st, but we do not have a date yet.
Matt, 20%. So if the governor's latest percentage, 20% of our state aid is about $6 million, correct?
Yeah, it depends on, so that's another thing. We really don't know. So 20% of our foundation aid's about $3.8 million. 20% of our total state aid, yeah, you're looking closer to $5 million. Yeah, it's an astronomical number that, you know, clearly we can't take into account yet. And that's not something we can finance.
So we did a legislative meeting today, a virtual Zoom session with Senator Helming, I forget, Mankeltoe from Wayne County area, and then Tom Reed's office. I believe that was all that was on. And, you know, just so everybody's aware, I think the one federal stimulus package that came through at the federal level, they wanted that money to go to schools, is what they're saying. It did, but then Governor Cuomo took the same exact amount away, so he backfilled it. There's another stimulus package they're working on, but the federal government's trying to find a way to do a wraparound, a pass-through directly to the districts, so Governor Cuomo can't do that again and take the equivalent amount again. And so, in other words, we're not getting any more or any less, but we're not getting any more as the federal government had intended to have happen. And so we just kind of talked and advocated, and we're putting together a variety of things to show them that, you know, this is the amount of reserves and fund balance we have to utilize. And this is the number of layoffs or attrition or cuts to programming that we have to look at now. Fortunately, we're in a situation where I think we'll be okay if we can just look at our pieces of attrition where folks have retired. We won't replace some of those folks, do things maybe a little differently and find some savings there. But we have districts in our region that they're cutting significantly. And if you're watching the news, you're seeing some of the signs of that already, that they've already made some significant cuts. We would be there eventually, but right now we're trying to be smart and capitalize on pieces of attrition when we can to stave off that really difficult decision that might be down the road. And so that's been our approach, and we hope to let that continue to be our approach. It may not be enough. That's the hard part. It may not be enough if the governor really does take that amount back.
Yeah, and so I guess what I would leave with, my presentation with is, we're not sure when we need to adopt the budget, sometime in early May, early to mid-May, we think. But remember, when we adopt the budget, that's our maximum spending limit. So we can adopt the budget, and then if the governor were to come out and say that it's an XYZ reduction, we just can't overspend our budget. We can always reduce after the adoption of the budget. We prefer to do it through the budget process, but clearly we don't have enough information at this point to make any additional changes.
Matt, if you're done, do you mind unsharing your screen so I can see everybody, please? Thank you.
Yep.
What questions or comments for Matt? John?
Got a couple, Matt. The budget vote date, I know it's still tentative. Did they do anything with school board member petitions? Have they extended that date accordingly, or have you heard anything on that?
Jamie, you might be able to speak to that better. I believe they've made that change, but I can't recall what it is.
Yeah, they just said that they didn't need to have their petition signed yet. They said they've extended the deadline on having their petitions filled out entirely to submit. So, but they haven't said when it's extended until, or maybe they'll just take whatever signatures they already have. Deb, have you heard anything beyond that?
That's all I've heard.
That's all she's heard as well.
And then I've got one kind of touchy subject. That lakefront project appears to be stalled, the one that has the PIF. we take legal action to force their hand or to cancel the PIF?
Funny you bring that up.
So, yeah.
They had a nerve.
So, yeah, I don't know how much is public on that project at this point. But yeah, we can definitely research, with our attorneys about any, once we have a definitive answer on what's going on with that project, we can work with our attorneys to see what litigation we can do if there's any that can be taken.
Remember, we have an agreement with the city and the county with shared legal representation. So we could probably go that avenue, wouldn't we, Matt?
Yes, probably.
Any other questions for Matt or Jamie? Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. Really nice job again. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Jamie, do you have anything else?
That's
Okay.
plenty.
Yeah. We have warrants for review. John and/or Jen, will you make motions, please? Jen first. John second. Questions or comments? All in favor by show of hands, please. Opposed? That carries unanimously, Deb.
Okay.
And then we have 2 votes for Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES. The first one will be on the budget. I'll ask for motions, actually more than 2 because we have to vote individually on candidates. Cheryl's first on the budget. The second, please. Jen, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Deb, thank you. And Deb, will you read off the names, please? And then we'll take motions on each person individually.
Sure. There's 3 vacant seats and there's 3 people for them. First one is Michael Ellis from Geneva.
I'll ask for motions for Michael Ellis, please. Jen first. I need a second. Milton, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Deb, next person, please.
Second one is Jeffrey Morehouse from Penn Yan.
Beth is first. I need a second. Cheryl, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thanks, Deb. Last one.
Ann Morgan from Romulus.
I'll ask for motions. Michelle, second, please. Bill, questions or comments? All in favor? And opposed. Passes unanimously. Thanks so much, Deb.
Thanks.
And Matt, or whoever, I don't know who's presenting the educational presentation, but that's where we are.
Hopefully you can see the presentation up on the screen. If I can get a thumbs up, that'd be super helpful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So thanks everyone. Joining me tonight are Stephanie Knapp and Jean McKenzie, who are going to help us through the presentation this evening. As you know, right around this time last year, we received feedback from as a result of the futures review. So tonight, the purpose of the presentation is to try to bring you up to speed on some of the things that have taken place based on those areas of opportunity that were identified from the study and the review that was conducted by Futures and presented to the board right around in May. If I can just get my slide to advance, that'd be wonderful. Here we go. So just a quick timeline of events. Last year we had been engaged in the Futures review process during the school year. In May, we had representatives from Futures come to the board and present some of the areas of opportunity that the district should take under consideration. As a result of that, the administrative team has been meeting in an ongoing way to try to develop more of a strategic plan and some pretty specific goals based on those different areas of opportunity, of which we'll show you some highlights of what those goals are and then some of the areas of accomplishment around that. And then tonight, obviously, we're here to provide you with some of that update regarding what we've been able to accomplish to date, and then some next steps of continued work as we did receive a large volume of feedback for us to consider, and we've been very strategically chipping away at what we felt like were some of the most important pieces to accomplish at the outset. And once we got some of those foundational pieces in place, we were going to try to build and enhance our planning from there. And so we really identified from the feedback that we received 3 main goals. The first piece, and you can see them displayed on your screen, was really thinking about our culture across the district and a shared commitment to all students. And this really spoke to helping everyone to understand our shared roles and responsibilities in relationship to working with students of varied needs, and to try to capitalize on the volume of resources that we had at our disposal, but to try to coordinate them in a way so that we could establish a greater level of continuity and then also awareness about how we can do that as a district better. And the second goal is talking about multi-tiered systems of support. And this is where Jean and Stephanie have been collaborating quite a bit to try to think about the varied levels and varied needs of students and how can we pool and capitalize on the resources that we have in order to make sure that we're really enhancing our instructional capacity, and then really thinking about how as an administrative team can we use what we have at our disposal to help students, to help teachers, to help students learn that have a variety of needs, and how can we do that pretty strategically. And then the third piece, which was a large part of the feedback and an area of opportunity for us to consider, was to think about how can we give professional learning to our staff in order to enhance our ability to work with students of varied needs. And that's a piece that we've tried to get creative with, and we've tried to build our capacity. Certainly there's much more learning that needs to occur, but we really did identify a few areas this year as a good starting point, of which we have had a large volume of participation in, but we're also hoping to expand as we go forward to enhance our collective capacity to meet student needs. And so I'm going to try to interact and use my screen and try to bounce back and forth between Jean and Stephanie, who are going to talk about each one of the goals. And Stephanie's really going to talk about goal number 1. Jean's going to talk about goal 2. They'll have a shared opportunity to talk about goal 3, about professional learning that's happened both in the realm of special programs and the realm of RTI. And then I'll talk about some next steps to try to summarize the presentation. So Stephanie, I think if you are able to unmute yourself and let me know at what point you'd like me to share each one of the documents. I do have those at the ready. So I'll turn things over to Stephanie to lead us through talking about our first goal.
Great, thank you, Matt. So when we speak of our shared commitment to all students, we really wanted to make sure that that ownership piece was addressed, and really making sure that we were taking it to mean that all stakeholders really understood the special education process. So making sure that we were informing both our teachers and parents of the parameters that are put forth in the Part 200s. And so the Part 200s are a guiding document that we have in special education from New York State. It's a lot of legalese. So trying to really distill that down to the salient points so that it's really user-friendly for both teachers and parents was very important to our team. So the first thing that we did was learned through Dan that we were able to create a Google folder that had me having all of the administrative rights to it, but all of our staff have the opportunity to look at the special education folder that is found in Google, and they have access to all of these documents. So again, the secrecy or the shroud behind special education hopefully has been lifted a little bit. So I want to point out 2 documents that live in there amongst a whole bunch of other resources. And the first one is the CSE trifold document. Matt, are you pulling that one up? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So not only does it have some of the language behind the Part 200s, if you look on the far left-hand side, it talks about school-aged eligibility. And so this is really speaking to the data that we need to look at the CSE table that would determine whether or not a student was eligible for special education services. The middle section speaks to our support staff, our secretarial staff, and what their roles and responsibilities are. We were finding that sometimes people did not know who to go to in our department. And so we really want to make sure that we were clearly articulating our roles and responsibilities. If you flip to the next page of this trifold document, it really speaks to the continuum of services that are available through the Part 200s. And again, we just pulled language straight from there and tried to make it more user-friendly for our consumers. And then on the far right-hand side, it has our contact information. So all of this information not only lives in our Google shared folder, but it's also the important information that's mailed out to parents when they request an initial eligibility meeting with us, so that they're understanding a little bit more about the data that we're looking at the table. And then the second document that Matt is going to pull up for you is based on the feedback that we received about our aid usage throughout the district. And when we compared ourselves to other local districts, we realized that we had a lot of ratio aids, 1-to-1, 2-to-1 aids in our classrooms, much more so than districts that are a similar size. So rather just calling it a gut reaction that somebody was requesting an aid support for their student in their classroom, we really wanted to create a salient document that any teacher could go through and determine whether or not a student needed an aid, but also the ratio of that aid. So we weren't just relying on last year's information. So if you scroll down in this document, you'll see that there's a rubric score, and these are just what would be considered by the Committee on Special Education. And then below, it has information that we would look through the IEP that would be our data to support that the student would need that level of care. So again, you're seeing on the ends of the 4, those are really the students that have really significant needs that need an adult support throughout their day, whereas a 0 or a 1, yes, a student might need some hurdle help or some additional assistance, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that 1-to-1 ratio or even throughout the day. So we've really found that this has been very useful at our CSE table, especially when explaining to a family that their child is being recommended to have a decrease in aid support. So again, we are able to go back through the IEP and find evidence that the student would need either a higher or lesser level of support. So hopefully this will translate to some changes in our aid request and also have an impact on our budget in the future.
I'm going to turn things over to Jean, who's going to talk about our second goal.
I'm going to apologize. I have a dog at my feet chewing a bone, but it's better than barking.
Okay.
The multi-tiered systems of support are intervention and tier 1, which is the classroom and special education, all working together. And really the best intervention is preventative. So really trying to help the general education teachers as they're working with students to promote that response to intervention as that first line of defense, which is really within general education. I'm actually going to start with that second bullet. We've been consistently refining our data collection, our progress monitoring processes, K through 12. Tracy Lindsay has been an amazing support there in designing our data sheets for the different benchmarks that we're collecting. The elementary school, the middle school, and the high school all have RTI and IST processes, which are the instructional support teams that look at student data. We're working towards aligning that more closely and working towards having more regular data teams that review data. At this point in time, we have the general education staff K through 5 completing fall, winter, and spring benchmarks, which are required by the state and are our data collection that help us delineate what level of service a student requires within the district. Then that information can also be used in special education meetings as teachers who are working in ICT classrooms or teachers who are working in a more self-contained classroom can use that information to show the student progress. So there's been a lot of work on the different forms of data that we're collecting. And again, Tracy Lindsay has been key and essential in helping us design and refine those forms. The IST processes themselves look different from elementary to the middle school to the high school by nature of the development of the students. The Canandaigua Academy is really using the early warning indicators and have grown. The team is actually moving from using them mostly as social emotional learning and moving more into using them instructionally. The middle school has been now more regularly using the iReady, reviewing that, and not only for placement, but to adjust instruction. So we've come a long way in refining our data collection, the referral processes, and the progress monitoring that we're using. And we're looking forward to aligning those processes even further as we move forward and look at the different needs within the building. And we've already discussed that with this current extended closure, that the majority of the students that we'll be receiving back into district will have many needs that would probably be considered tier 2. And so again, that is something that goes right along with this goal, that we would be supporting general education teachers in the kinds of intervention that you would need in the classroom to close those gaps as we, whenever we do return to the actual building itself as we move ahead. And now, Matt, if you can click on the trifold. Thank you. We have a trifold that was shared at our Title I meeting. John LaFave and I had a Title I meeting at the elementary school. It's not so dissimilar from what Stephanie shared. It describes an instructional support team, what a data review meeting is, how we coordinate the services so that our interventionists, our classroom teachers, our ICT teachers, and our related service providers are all using the same language and working towards the same goal. And a big component of that as well, which is and has been very successful, is the students' metacognition, that they actually are setting those goals and that they are progress monitoring those goals along with the special educator, along with an interventionist, and along with a classroom teacher or related service provider. We are looking to increase our family and school connections. There have been some open house nights. There's been information nights. We had a Title I night in the fall. And we did do some survey of the community to see what they were interested in and are using that information as we move forward as well. So it's a short description of what is AIS, what is RTI, and those terms are often used interchangeably, that academic intervention service and response to intervention. We have in-class or pull-out support. And again, as we move forward, knowing that our structures are changing as we speak, as we are using much more technology, we're using remote learning. We will be receiving students who will have a variety of skill gaps that I think it's even, I think the services that we provide through special education, through academic intervention and response to intervention will be even more necessary as we move forward throughout this kind of unusual time that we're in right now. So, yeah, that's the end of my slide.
Thank you, Jean.
Thanks.
And so we're doing as best we can with changing times. We're realizing that it's very difficult for us to get subs in for teachers to participate in professional development. So we've had to be really creative about how we are availing people of those opportunities. So hopefully you had an opportunity to click on the link that's put your mind at ease with IEPs. But anyway, it's just, we're learning to be comfortable with the technology too. So we've been videotaping ourselves, going through different PowerPoints, presentations, and then reaching out to Matt and Katie to make those things available to our teachers via their learning plans that are available. So a teacher might decide that they are going to do a self-directed learning opportunity and then be able to get credit towards their professional development by participating in some of these online opportunities. So you'll hear Chris Page's voice if you were to click on that one. We also have opportunities through our professional organizations. So the Council for Exceptional Children has done a number of opportunities with Marilyn Friend, who's kind of the guru in co-teaching. So she will have some live and or recorded presentations, and we've been making our teachers aware of those opportunities and capturing those for them to participate in at their leisure.
And within intervention, we're continuing to use the independent reading level assessment. They're doing, the interventionists are doing a pilot this year. One component is assessment, and then we have a variety of books that we've been using within instruction. The ERLA pilot itself also includes their skill cards, so that once the students are assessed, they set their own power goals, and then they have particular skills that they work through. So we had a full training day. They've been utilizing those materials, and we did a visitation to Patty Hill School in Greece, where we were able to see the materials in action and ask questions of staff that have been using that for about 3 years now. Another focus has really been math training, but really based on the standards, as we've been doing across PES, they're doing a math pilot. The math training that's occurring within intervention is really specific to the standards and building conceptual knowledge and math thinking. So we have interventionists who are participating in online coursework for building math minds and math running records, which are mini courses, and then training from within. So training other interventionists by also doing model instruction and then having the other interventionists observe and then work with their own kids, and then they'll switch and take turns observing one another. So that training has been occurring. The multi-language learners training was something that we also had the ELL teachers attend with us. So Leslie Tomanovich came and Kelly Powell. And that correlates also with the ERLA pilot. A lot of the materials that we have are designed to be very diverse and to incorporate our multi-language learners. So we've had a variety of focuses with interventionists who select a specific area of expertise, and then they share that expertise with one another and use it in their instruction throughout the day during intervention.
So I'm just going to try to wrap things up with some next steps. Obviously, we have just, as I mentioned in the beginning, started to focus on some of the bigger rocks and bigger areas of opportunity. So there's a lot more we want to continue to implement, whether it's looking for additional opportunities for professional learning or looking at additional places where we can cohesively try to address some of the needs and focus areas that Jean and Steph have both talked about this evening. And not only are we looking at professional learning and looking at places to implement that feedback, but we also want to try to see how we can continue to link this work to our district strategic plan. So as we looked at the strategic plan being implemented for the first time, obviously it was a new approach and a new plan. A lot of the work that happens both within special programs and within RTI are very much foundational to the work that we need to do if we want to continue to move forward and close any learning gaps that exist for students. So finding ways to be really explicit about where that can take place is going to be important for us to continue to identify, not only to enhance our work in this area, but to enhance our district strategic plan as well. And before I wrap up, I really want to make sure I give kudos to both Stephanie and Jean. This was a tremendous amount of feedback that we received. And the two of them, I think, have worked this year incredibly well, not only with their teams, but as a team. And I think they've really led the other members of our administrative team, certainly at our building levels and within the respective teams, to try to get us to a place where we can even begin to have conversations about this stuff. And I do know that the staff feels incredibly appreciative about the opportunities for professional learning, the feedback that they've received, and the chances to collaborate with one another to try to help address the needs of students. So it's been really great to see, and it's been an incredible lift, and I do want to thank them for all of their ongoing work. So
Great.
that's all I had in particular. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so
Perfect.
everyone can see everyone. And
Great.
if you have any questions, we'd be happy to take.
Great. What questions does anybody have or comments? John?
Just, I've always had, you know, the utmost respect for that department. You guys are almost a school within a school, if you think about it. And in 14 years, you're still the department I feel I know the least amount about. For some reason, I don't even see a presence on our website for your department. I've looked, you're not under academics. You have one page under the district department page, which pretty much is your pictures and your titles. But like that trifold, while you were presenting, I thought I want to take a closer look. There's nothing on our website. Under education, there is, under the education tab, you've got everything you think of except your department. So I think one of the areas that, you know, for the general public, even, you know, someone like me who hasn't had a lot of exposure to your department in particular, would be to have something on there. So a parent has not had any contact with your department, all of a sudden their child enters middle school and they get a letter, you know, that there's now potential for a need that didn't exist in the past. And it could, you know, it's going to throw them off. They're going to start looking, they're going to start researching, and get nervous. It would be nice if we could have some presence, some public presence of your department, a little more prominence for your department to the public.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Brian?
I just had to apologize for laughing. I thought maybe we should check on Beth. She looks like she's getting attacked.
You okay there?
I'm okay, thank you. Crazy cat. I just had to move around.
Okay. That's where we are in our lives right now. Thank you, John. I think that's a really good suggestion.
Can we have, Stephanie, can you connect with Caroline and she can kind of coordinate how we can be a little more, you know, inclusive and prominent on our website?
Absolutely. A lot of those materials could easily be on there. I think that some of the feedback that we got a while ago was about making sure that all of our materials were accessible. So we'll just want to make sure that it's in some kind of format that meets the ADA requirements.
Jen?
To follow on with that though, I would love to see eventually something on the website that puts some personality to it. This can be pretty scary for a lot of families, to John's point. And I think that it's big kudos to both of you in particular that you have been so patient in explaining this. So if there was a way to present it in a fashion that was the most accessible to families, that would be helpful, even beyond ADA requirements.
Well, to reflect the loving, inclusive, wonderful department you are. I think that's what we're all going for. What else? What other questions or comments? Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for a really comprehensive presentation. That was great. You're welcome to stay and welcome to go. You know, the usual. Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, sorry. I sometimes when I see waves, I think you're raising your hand, so I apologize for stalling there. Jamie, can I move on to consensus agenda now? Did you have anything else? Okay, so I have consensus agenda for approval. I'll ask for motions, please. Michelle and Beth, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously, Deb. Thank you. I don't think we have any committee reports or anything like that. Jamie, do you have anything for the greater good?
I do not. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Stay well, stay healthy. Thank you for being with us tonight. To those we can't see, good night, everyone. I'll ask for a meeting to adjourn. Michelle and Milton. Good night, everybody.
Night. Stop recording.
A total of 15 people watching.
Good.